welcome back.
And we're moving into our first segment for today, and as promised before the break, we're sitting down to speak with Yvette Burks about Gift of Life, but also the Mercy Burn Victims Mercy Fund. That's it. Thank you very much. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning, William and Marlene, and thank you for the very quick invitation to be here. I must tell you that I'm happy you said Gift of Life first, because Gift of Life is a program that reaches so many more Belizean children and that so many more people identify with and know the name of. And Gift of Life Belize, which is a Rotary Club of Belize program, fully endorses and supports Burn Victim Mercy Fund to the tune of one full budget of a heart patient, but also the members individually support Burn Victim Mercy Fund. Burn Victim Mercy Fund, although it's been around almost 2 decades now, is one that less people know about, and that's a really good thing because burns are horrible.
Yeah.
They are horrible.
Now let's talk about what prompted this spin-off into the Burn Victims Mercy Fund. And you say it has been a very long time, but since people don't know, we'll go back into the history.
Actually, it's the opposite. But it started out for me as an individual the opposite way.
Yeah.
I became involved with burn children's cases before I was a Rotarian and before I became the chair of Gift of Life.
Okay.
And because of my involvement in the Burn Victim Mercy Fund, once I found out about the other patients, the heart patients, the whatever, and through my personal friends, the Woods, John Woods actually invited me to Rotary years ago now. It was really by virtue of the fact that I already had a personal interest in children and in burns.
Okay. And how many persons have benefited from the fund so far?
Gosh, I recently did a count, and I believe with Catherine now it's about 26.
Okay.
And some of them are directly, some of them are indirectly, some of them come back later. And all of those children too pretty much have benefited from Gift of Life Belize, because for many years, in addition to supporting the individual child, we sent $1,000 up to Shriners to help with the $10 a day hosting of the family at the Ronald McDonald House. Every year we sent up $1,000 to Shriners.
Now, how does it work actually in terms of you reaching out or families reaching out to you?
Families pretty now it's going to where doctors reach out. But families reach out. Very rarely I reach out. Occasionally somebody says, "Did you hear about that burn child?" And then I would look into it. Unfortunately, we have way too many burns in Belize, and so many of them, you know, it's a safety issue, really.
Yes.
It's a lot of little things that could be avoided, and unfortunately isn't avoided because of whatever the circumstances are. But we do have a lot of burns, many of whom I don't have to touch, I don't have to do anything with, because Belize, thank God, albeit we have very limited resources, we have very skilled, dedicated physicians who have been able to work on a lot of the cases. Nobody is the wiser.
Yeah.
But then you have the more serious cases, the ones that are, you know, 3rd degree, 2nd degree, extensive area of the body. And those children will either be at risk of dying or certainly of having very diminished quality of life.
Yes.
And those are the children that usually I will become involved with.
In the case of Catherine, by the time the story was able to be published in the mainstream media, it was the case that she was already sent out to the Children's Hospital at that time, and it was a referral done through the hospital, the staff at the hospital. Let's talk about the type of support that the Burn Victims Mercy Fund provides to families.
Okay, yeah, good point. See, most cases, almost all cases, unless the person got burned in an event that hit the news immediately, I would say more than 60% of the children I've helped, you all don't even know about, or it didn't really hit the news until way after the fact. And actually that's the way I prefer it. And that is one reason why Burn Victim Mercy Fund has been able to survive by the you know, skin of her teeth, because people know that by the time we're asking for support, usually the child is gone. Burn Victim Mercy Fund, honestly, has been made possible by the fact that my husband, who is unfortunately dearly departed, supported my craziness, because a lot of times what it took, everything comes together, you get the referral, usually I'll make the initial contact, get the action going, and then the doctor to doctor, the physician to physician conference will happen, and there will be a yes or a no. And to be honest with you, if the doctor wanted to, the doctor could do that as well. What the difference is unfortunately money. Because usually
the transport out.
That's the big thing, and the logistics. So let's take Catherine's case. Catherine's case was an especially difficult case, because usually and Rotary Gift of Life 100% supports this, but I'm on that committee, and I've been on that committee since I joined. We can help 10 children for the budget of one child, one burn child's air ambulance. 10 children can have their heart fixed. And so I fully support our position that we cannot say we'll 100% pay for that air ambulance. However, that air ambulance needs to be secured. If it's during the week, very few people get hurt during the week, during regular banking hours. No problem. I go in and I get an overdraft from the Belize bank. I guarantee it personally. We wire the money, it's all done. Unfortunately, Easter, this child got burned on Good Friday night. Everything is closed. It wasn't even just Belize that was affected. Even the air ambulances were scrambling to get a physician for the flight, you know, having to make the special arrangements with the U.S. government for them to go in without documents was hard, because even they had a certain closing hour. It was very difficult. Now, that's where the money becomes an issue. Normally, the way that it works is that I secure it with my credit card. When my husband was alive, that was a lot easier. But so I would say, and back in the day, it used to be cheaper. I mean, it used to be $8,000, $10,000 US dollar for an air ambulance. It's now 19 and 20 and 21 and 22,000 US. US. And in the case of Catherine, who went all the way to Boston, it was 31,000 US. So finding 31,000 US upfront and saying, hold this until I process the bank's overdraft, and then get the generous contributions to pay it back slowly, they didn't work out so well for me, because I didn't have all of the credit right away. So thank God in this case I was able to seek a full sponsorship for it, for the air ambulance. So I owe nothing on the air ambulance.
Yeah. And you have a network currently in place that you tap into quite often for these things.
Yes.
But that can't be, is it sustainable?
Not really when you have two burns. And in 2010, people might remember there were two horrible burns all at once. We had little Kent Flowers Jr. and we had Damari Tesikun. And that was truly, truly hard. My hope for Burn Victim Mercy Fund is that there will always be at least one air ambulance, maybe two, readily available and replenished when the next child gets burned and their donations. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work that way. So some children, we get a little surplus, but the problem is with burns, it's ongoing. So they come home after 3 months, 6 months, whatever, they have to go back. They have to get treated. They need more surgeries. Not all of them have to go back, because we do have some plastic surgery teams that come in and out that are able to do some of the surgeries. Like Kent Flowers Jr. now is getting his surgeries in Orange Walk through the LEAP program and through the teams coming in. So thank God there are options now. But then there are others, and I'm using the name because I know she doesn't mind, Damari, who has to go back because she lost a limb. And she has to get surgeries and she has to get new prosthetics and whatever. So we have to find the plane tickets.
So she travels every year.
Every year.
Since her accident.
Right. And sometimes back in the day, twice a year. So what you have is you have a situation where if there is any surplus, then I have to use it to help to support families to go back and forth.
Let me ask another question, because very often we hear of the burn victim and you talk about it happening with Catherine on Good Friday. How quickly do they need to get out of country for it to make a difference?
Oh gosh, that first 24 hours is amazing. Amazing. We have had situations where, you know, it's so, Danae, everybody knows Danae Chevalier. She lost both her legs because unfortunately of the timing and, you know, the problems with the burns and the management and stuff. And that, so every single hour counts. So the recuperation or the ability to restore is diminished by every hour that is added on. So it's unfortunate that it took more than 36 hours to get Catherine out. It couldn't be helped because it was Easter Sunday. It was, you know, it was, in fact, that was so hard. And I must tell you, that was so hard because her mommy was burned. Her daddy was here with them. Nobody could find the passports right away. Then they found the passports. Nobody could find the birth certificate. And thank God she had birth certificate. In fact, I should say to the Belizean public, when your baby is born, please go get the birth certificate.
Why is that important?
To travel.
I am also birth ambulance. Do you know how often people don't have a birth certificate? Forget gift of life, we're trying to fly out a baby who is just born and has a heart problem. You know how often people have expired passports? We have to physically see a passport before we agree to fly somebody to Guatemala on our aircraft, which most people know as Wings of Hope. Because so often people never think about the travel document.
Yeah. Perhaps they don't travel very often, so they feel it isn't necessary. But in the case of an emergency where you need to get out ASAP, that becomes one of the things that extends the amount of time before you can seek treatment.
And in the case of Catherine, I need to tell you, if Catherine did not have a birth certificate, she would not have gone anywhere. She would not have left this country.
Do you have contacts locally, like where you could go to call the registry and be able to get some assistance to get her birth certificate?
I need to work. I need to work on renewing my contacts at Vital Statistics. I am not doing well there. At the passport office, I must tell you I do okay, but in this case, that was a moot point.
Yeah.
You can't stop to deal with the passport when you have a child dying of severe burns.
So in lieu of the passport, they can very often use the birth certificate?
It's an absolute final option. I mean, it's an option you don't want to take. It's so difficult. It's so, I mean, we're begging Homeland Security to meet the aircraft and do a special clearing to save this child's life. And it's not something you take lightly.
You know, I've never thought of that, but that is an important point that perhaps needs to be reminded to the public about keeping your documents up to time.
And if possible in a fireproof something, that you can use it.
And where the rest of the family knows where it is. Sometimes mom is the one who secures stuff.
I know, right?
And then you never know where it is after that.
Let me ask another question, because looking at the situation, and you're talking about the cost, and we're racing against time and all of that, but there's also the factor that they need several surgeries and they may also be there for an extended amount of time.
So Catherine's is a perfect case for the public. So usually after, you know, we've sent off a child and stuff, I say, guys, I have spent $40,000, who will help? And I have to pause right here and tell you there are certain people, I mean, I do this strictly on faith. I trust God, and I know if it's His will that that child is to be saved, He will help me find a way. It's as simple as that. It's about faith. I adore children, and I absolutely hate suffering. And the thought of a child, or an adult, I mean, my friend Romy, my heart breaks for him and his family. But for a child, and to be able to restore some decent quality of life if that child lives is so huge for me. So I go out every time this happens, and like this time, I knew I didn't have the credit to get the airplane here, but I knew that if it was God's will, I would find a way. And it's as simple as that. And so, you know, I pray about it. I keep praying about it. I can't tell you I don't get emotional about it. I do. But I know that it can happen. But no, Catherine's airplane is taken care of. She's there. She's covered. There are things they need, but there are costs. And I was working with the neighbors who helped me to find the birth certificate and so on. And I said, you guys are out there raising funds. Let's be specific. Daddy is the breadwinner, and Daddy has to be with Catherine.
Because Mom is in the hospital
Mommy is in the hospital here. There is no way that Daddy can be here working and there with Catherine. So you have to come up with a simple budget of what it will cost to keep that family together. The basic
Do they have other children?
Yes, they have 3 other children, I understand, 15, 12, and 7.
Okay.
So it's a difficult time. I have said to the family, to the neighbors and well-wishers, come up with a realistic budget and make sure that there is integrity in terms of the collection of funds and the disbursement of those funds. There is one cost that I always ask people to honor if it's possible, and even when I raise money, I give it, and that's the birth ambulance cost. Birth ambulance serves 400 plus calls a month now, and unfortunately less than 100 of those are collectible. We're so busy, only by the grace of God, we go from month to month. And so we have a standard cost that we usually use for air ambulance. If that's payable, if you can collect enough to pay that, fine. There's also a little bill at Carl Euchner for 400 and something. Mommy is going to have a bill. So make your budget and raise it. In my mind, in the first instance, that could be as little bit as $5,000 to $6,000 needed. In the long term, let's say if you want to look futuristic to a year or two, maybe 12 to 15,000. If you want to say we want to raise enough so that we can pay for a return ticket or two, so that when Shriners calls and says Catherine is doing great, she can come back home.
Yeah.
We can jump up and buy that ticket and bring her home. Those are the things I usually do with the Burn Victim Mercy Fund money.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I beg the airlines, please give me a ticket. I think Continental gave Damari her first flight home. So that's
and you've
my
also
network.
had people with the case of Damari, for example, where people donate their mileage.
Yes.
Which is something people can easily do.
Easily do.
If
And
they're
then
about
I pay
to
the
expire.
tax.
Yeah.
Yes, and then I pay the taxes. In fact, twice Philip Milken from Belize Mills of my club generously gave miles for Damari and her mom to travel. And all I had to do was pay the, or at least he gave 2 tickets. And all I had to do was pay the mileage. And in the past, for other children, I had other people, Americans, who gave their miles.
Yeah.
And, it's fantastic. But in Belize, there are Belizeans who believe in this program, who understands this program, and who trust me. And I'd like to say thanks.
Yeah.
There are people, certainly like Cisco Construction, there are the Dunkers down south. There are huge donors who give every single time, without question, who understands it, who knows where it's going, and who sees the results. And I appreciate that so much, because without them, I could not do it.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I wanted to focus on that because very often as you're talking about this and the support that the family needs is usually for an extended period of time.
Yes.
So, like you said with Catherine and her family, her mom being burnt, that requires some financing as well. And then the other children, obviously, whosoever will be taking care of them, and then the father being away and everything
The breadwinner
else.
is away. Yeah.
Breadwinner. So you're looking at all of that, but very often people, it falls out of the news. And how do you continue to get support?
What I suggested to the neighbors, and Miriam is a person I've been talking to a lot, and I actually physically made a budget, because I am kind of compulsive, obsessive about money, and I make sure, obsessive, compulsive, however you say that, I make sure that every single red hot penny that is given for a cause goes to that cause. Because you're only as good as your name. Yeah. And I would never want to have a problem with that. So I've explained to them, make a budget. And I actually sent them an actual spreadsheet as a suggestion. Come up with what it will cost, because in the initial instance, when you're in the news, is when you will raise the money. Don't go crazy rich because, oh, I got $10,000, I can start spending. No. Think about that $10,000 as for the next year, as for the next 6 months, as for the next 2 years.
For the return tickets,
and
for the visit, for
and
the
make sure
check-ins.
you do your actual allotments. Make sure that you say, okay, this I won't touch this $3,000. I will need that for whatever. Because what people do is they start collecting money and they feel like there's more where that came from. And so the good stewardship of that money is what's really important.
We didn't get a chance to complete, and I think it's important for people to understand it as well, the treatment for burn victims, and especially severe cases, because that's what the Burn Victim Mercy Fund is used for. In the case of Catherine and other persons you said, it's almost half of their body. They talk about percentage, 50%, 40% burns. Third degree, which people don't always understand the difference between first, second, and third. Third is the most severe.
Oh, yes.
If you could explain that, why third is the most severe, and then what is the actual treatment that these children have to go through.
Right.
Because it's very painful, and a lot of people don't know that.
Oh, I know. So first degree is like we touch the kettle,
Yeah.
and it blisters up a little bit and it hurts and terribly. Second degree goes through the second layer of the
To the
skin,
skin.
and third degree goes into the actual flesh.
Sometimes to the bone.
Yes, and so you and with burns, what it's doing, people forget sometimes that the skin is the organ. I mean, it's an actual organ. What kills burn victims most is the infection, because you're exposed, and so we love our burn patients to death. And sometimes
Literally.
here we do. We go visit them and we take them all the germs from the street and our home and our children, and they die. And the management of that burn case is so intense. I mean, it's just amazing. Most burn patients who are severely burned have to be handled on dialysis because their kidneys cannot handle the impurities that is being introduced to their body by the open wounds and stuff. There is also the cleaning of the actual burns, because you cannot, it doesn't make sense to us. Like, we're thinking, okay, I just got a bite and I scratched the scab off by accident and it hurt and it bled, and I said, why did I do that? No, it will scar. It's the opposite with burns. You have to keep it clean. You have to take off all the dead tissue, because if there is dead tissue there is a potential of infection. It has to be bleeding. You have to make sure that there is activity, that there is a life, because you're trying to restore life to that piece of skin. That's not an easy process. I mean, it's literally a tweezer job, because it's about keeping it clean, yes. And so what they do is, especially with burns of this severity, Catherine has been through so many procedures already, you wouldn't even believe it. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of care. People need to know that. Patients like, gosh, I can't even name them. Damari herself, Danae, all of those kids, they're over $1 million US in the first level of care that they got, because they're in intensive care for so long. Another thing people need to know is, for months you don't know if the child will live. You still don't know if Catherine will live. I believe she will, because I always believe they will live, and they always live. I had a little girl named Julia from Cayo. She arrested during the flight from here to Galveston. Not once, not twice, 3 times. And she's here to tell the story. Once those kids are in the air, I always believe they live. And I know that's not always true, but that's what I believe. And so far, it's been true.
So the healing process is a part of their treatment, and therefore they have multiple surgeries, sometimes 3-4 times a week.
Oh gosh. Yeah. And cleaning.
Yeah, and cleaning.
And what I was saying, that so they take off the dead skin and then they start grafting. And then a lot of times they will graft from other areas of your body. So they will take your own skin and graft it back. There are times when kids are so severely burned, and so much of them is burned, that there is no skin to graft with. And so then they will use cadaver for the grafting. And that, of course, also works. So in the case of Catherine, her grafting is probably just about complete at this point. The healing process has to continue.
Now, you said something that was very interesting, because you spoke about you don't know whether they're going to survive, actually, and it's a long process. So what's the first sign, and often how long does that take to get to that point where you say, they're out of the woods finally?
When the failures stop happening, when the body regulates itself and all of your chemistry starts getting normal again, in a medical point. For me, it's when it's possible to get them in the air.
Well, because Shriners is,
yes.
I mean, it's...
Burn Center is amazing.
Yeah, and it is top class in the care that they offer.
Definitely. And see, usually all the kids I send are at the Galveston Lake. There are a couple of the kids that I sent first there, and then like Darwin Cruz from Independence started getting treated in Boston because he had relatives in that area he could stay with. Danae Chavarria started some treatment in Boston. I chose Boston this time because that's where I could find that sponsorship too.
Okay.
Okay. So that's why she went to Boston. If it was my money guaranteeing the ambulance, it would have to been Galveston, Texas, because it's $10,000 US cheaper.
Yeah. So she's in Boston currently, and her father is there. There's the home, the Ronald McDonald home, yeah,
which is fantastic.
that her father stay.
Right. So when Dad pays, it's $10 a day for Dad to pay. I should make a point here. During the initial phases, I usually try it when it's hard, because you wouldn't believe what all you're trying to cover in a couple of hours with the families about their potential to help or to pay or whatever. There has been a couple of cases where it was outright paid by the family or by whoever for them to go, and then I didn't have to put up my money. You need to know that. In Danae's case, her auntie was able to pay on her credit card. So that was awesome. So I just did the logistics and the arrangements. And I must tell you, one of the first kids, or the first kids we ever did, I was ever involved when I started. John Woods paid for that one back then. And then we raised the money to put it back, and Lassell Arnold was very involved in raising the money for Femron and his sister.
So sometimes the fundraising that takes place after the child has left the country is to repay what people have often paid on a credit card.
Sometimes it is.
Yeah.
Mostly it is to just put into the Burn Victim Mercy Fund, because I tried to explain the process, and I don't think I did it clearly. So the plane comes here by holding my credit card or somebody else's usually. And then I go to the Belize bank, and I must thank Philip Johnson, who years ago, almost 20 years ago, allowed me to open a non-interest paying, no fees account that just sits there and waits for the next burn victim. And then I guarantee personally the overdraft, whether it's 20,000, 30,000, or 40,000. I wire up the US dollars to the airplane, and they release my credit card. That's the way it's worked for all the years. And that's the way that it works 70% of the time. And then any donation that is given, and I need you to know I've gotten as little as $5, and every $5 counts.
Yeah.
Goes into that account, and it helps to replenish or pay back. And most of the time, it pays it back in full. A few times it pays it back with a little surplus, praise the Lord. And a couple of times I've been left holding the bag a little bit, but that's okay. That's a risk that I take. And as long as it's not too much where I have to starve or not be able to pay my daughter's school fees, it's okay.
Now, it's listening to the entire scenario, because often the challenge is the use of the money, and I like the fact that you spoke about being a good steward in terms of the money, because you'll have people walking around telling the story and you trying to raise funds. So what's your advice to families in terms of managing that process, that, you know, someone doesn't walk up and say, well, I'm the uncle of this particular child. How do you advise them to actually consolidate that fund in the first place?
I never advise people to give to individuals, and that might sound harsh, but by virtue of my involvement for so many years with Gift of Life with Burn Victim Mercy Fund, unfortunately, I have seen such abuse. It's very unfortunate. I won't call the name, but there was one of the burn children that understood a radio and television station, did a radiothon for several years ago, and supposedly they got like $18,000 in pledge. I can sincerely tell you that aside from the very first day that child was burned, Dad showed up with $800 towards the air ambulance Burn Victim Mercy Fund. Since then, I haven't seen a red hot penny. That family still solicits. I have had Rotarians across this country, he's gotten wise to who the Rotarians are, call me up and go, why is this person calling for money? And they found a living, and it's sad because you know that it's hard. You know they're struggling.
Because people give from their heart to these causes, and they don't necessarily know whether or not it's being used for that. Because what you're trying to say is the cost of the service is taken care of. They don't have additional bills. Once they're at Shriners, it's taken care of. Right.
Let me see if I can explain that a little bit. So I encourage families to be involved. I will use the Maris family again. The Maris family, they had a very good network of family. They had a relative in Punta Gorda who did a little barbecue fundraising thing, donated the funds. It was like $1,000 or $2,000 towards the air ambulance. Her dad is a pastor in a church up in Orange Walk. They raise funds by barbecuing, by whatever, and they put it straight into the fund. This was while it was going on. That kind of thing, as long as it's clear what's happening or whatever, you know, that's good. I also encourage them to help. Like Gift of Life pays for their ticket to return a couple times. Burn Victim Mercy Fund, as long as I had money left over from their air ambulance, I paid for their ticket. One time they had to find the money themselves because I literally had no money left. And then, unfortunately, they had to really go out and raise it. A lot of times I apply to the airlines. But usually I say to people, question each instant individually. And be careful about what you're giving. Because in one case, I paid for a ticket. Somebody had a sponsor in Houston who was paying for the ticket. And that person was still raising money for that same ticket. So
you need to do a bit of investigation.
A little bit of investigation, I think.
No, I have that same awareness because it's everywhere that you go. You could be at the supermarket and somebody brings a paper that says, I have a child
that's sick. It really pulls on your heartstrings.
And you don't know. You don't know. But I've always been more inclined to give to organizations because I know there's an established system in place for accountability.
We just received, for instance, visa fees, which are pretty expensive now, for a child who is supposed to go for heart surgery from a donor. But he didn't want to give the $640 to mom and the child for the visa. He said, could Gift of Life please hold this? Whenever you get the date for the heart surgery, I have contributed the visa fee. And things like that make such a difference.
So you can earmark funds. If I meet a parent, I get the name, and I can perhaps give it to an organization and say, this is
in
for
the child's name.
This child.
Right. And we do handle stuff that way.
So
we call it designated funds.
Okay.
So what happens now, for example, with Catherine going forward?
So Catherine, by virtue of the fact that she's going to have horrible problems probably for a long time with her vision, and certainly her hands are a challenge. She was so badly burnt on her hands. I can foresee so much therapy. And speaking of therapy, I must tell you, that's one of the beauty of going to Shriners. It's not just physical. We're talking about emotional therapy, counseling, teaching them how to live with their injuries, how to live with the new self, the family and the child, and helping them to reintegrate into society, to get back in and to have children accept you. I can say this again because he's her friend. Everybody knows Cisco Woods. Do you ever look at Cisco and see a burnt car? I don't.
You've looked completely past it at this point.
I see a whole fabulous man. And that is what we try to accomplish with every child. We try to get them to the point where when they go to school, they look across the room, they see William. They don't notice that William's hair is half gone, or that William is wearing a pressure suit because he's trying to get his scars to flatten out. They see a whole human being, beautiful.
And perhaps that's one of the things that we have to deal with as well, how the public responds. Because we often talk about it even in passing, you know. People have this attitude, they see you, they haven't seen you for a long time. Y'all, if you get fat, you know, that kind of stuff.
I know, William, you don't have to tell me.
But it's that kind of sensitivity that people have to be aware of, that someone has been through something that is, you know, and life-threatening, that you don't want to stare, you don't want to pat, and you have to make sure that people are aware of issues like that.
And teaching children, because children innocently will notice differences, and it's how they respond to it, and it depends on how much the parents educate them on people being different.
The sensitization,
and the tolerance,
and it needs to come from the teachers. It needs to be so that everybody understands and everybody accepts, because it's hard. It's hard on that family. It's hard, you know, the mom, bless her heart. You know, can you imagine? She was innocently trying to take care of pests, which seems like an extreme way to do it. And now this, I mean, she needs help, emotional help. It's really traumatic. And it's so important that this is addressed.
And so, in Catherine's case, she is 53%?
Yes.
And it's all the upper body?
It's mostly upper. She has some on her legs as well.
Okay, so it's the entire
upper,
head, hands, and the treatment that, as we've reported before and as you've mentioned, it is probable that she will lose her sight
Yes, it's probable.
and functionality in her arms.
Yes. They will do the best they can to restore it, but at this point, what they're seeing is not, it's not so good yet, but we're a long way off. And so what happens next is they keep treating and treating and treating. At the point she comes out of danger, that's all awesome. She still has to stay there to continue to heal and to start with therapy. And then at some point, they're going to contact and they're going to say she's ready to come home. And so we'll have to bring her home.
And that could be 4, 6.
Well, yeah, we don't know.
You don't know.
We don't know. 3 months, 4 months, 6
It's the
months.
last
Okay. And then they're going to say her next appointment date is this date, and it could be 4 months later, 6 months later. And she goes back, and then they check and they see, because with burns, as they heal, as they grow, the burn scars tighten. So let's say they had her to where she was opening her hands. As she grows, because there is burn scar, there are burn scars, it might be that the hands can't open anymore. So now she has to go back. They have to do what they call release surgery. Some of them are simpler, some of them are greater. In the case of my little Kent Flowers, he's now took a while for me to convince Daddy he could do it here, and I understand. But he can now see the plastic surgery team here because they can do it. He couldn't lift his hands anymore because he was growing and the burn scars tightened. Well, the plastic surgeons here can do that. They can loosen the scars so that he has good functionality again. And there are certain things that needs to happen. So there are surgeries that will continue for years, and Shriners will support these children up to the age of 21 years old. They will get it free until they're 21.
Now, I want to, before we wrap, because you said something very early on, and you were talking about the emotional support that is offered and the therapy and everything else for those who go to Shriner. The families that are left behind, take for example Catherine's mom and stuff, does your organization do something to collaborate, for example, to get perhaps some counseling and some emotional support for her? Or how do we handle that, and how does your organization help in terms in those situations?
Not well, unfortunately. Aside from trying to advise the family, and in this case, I wrote an email trying to explain. I always try to make sure that there's full disclosure, that everybody's on the same page, that everybody understands 100% what happened, how it happened, what needs to be happening, and then I welcome calls. But I am somebody who likes to put the written word together so that you can't say that I said something I didn't. And there's clarity. One of the things I tried to emphasize to the family is please remember the emotional support. Now, how they're handling it, I don't know. I will be honest with you, I have not been to see Mom. There are a couple of reasons. For one thing, we haven't actually met. And Mom is Spanish speaking, and my Spanish is okay, but it's very limited, and I don't feel that I could convey what I need to convey adequately to Mom. And also, of course, being a burn patient, I don't need to be visiting her and taking her my germs.
It's stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. So unfortunately, I have hoped that the relatives are giving her the love and support. But no, the short answer is no. We're very lacking in that area. And I'll tell you what, we would welcome any kind of involvement, whether it be clerical, somebody from the clergy who thinks they could help in these circumstances. If it's a professional counselor, whoever, please, if you think you can help, please, because these families struggle. Think about the circumstances of any of these burns. Everybody's sitting there going, I shouldn't have, I shouldn't have, I shouldn't have. Femron and his sister got burned because somebody left the bottle of gasoline next to the fire they had fixed to roast the cashew. Big brother saw it and kicked it out of the way. The fuel flew on Femron and his sister. It's the little things, because the lid wasn't tightened on it, and of course it was too close. There are little things, and we all sit there and we question, we say, oh, I couldn't have.
The case with Romy Badiou is another one. That's something that happens quite often. People don't think about how the possibilities exist once you're dealing with fuel and...
Yes.
But I brought up that particular case because it does highlight another scenario. Your organization currently helps children because of the work at Shriners. There's a cutoff age. So if it happens to adult, in the case of Romy, we saw where there has been a huge effort to fundraise to get, there was an effort to get him out, and there's an effort now to sustain the cost of his treatment.
Okay.
So we as adults have to think of this as well,
Okay,
and
so
what we would do.
Right. So until a year ago, I would have said exclusively children. A year ago, you will remember that I helped to coordinate the move of Dwayne from Placencia. Do you all remember his case, Dwayne Flowers?
Was that the one on the pier where he was in a boat?
He was an electrical worker or something, and a butane tank blew up on him in Placencia. You remember that? Anyway, Dwayne was a 28-year-old young man. So chances are that I can help some adults, and I need to underscore that. And the reason is because there is also a cutoff for age. The risks and the cost of service and so on goes up depending on your age, your physical fitness, the different underlying factors, maybe diseases that already exist and so on. So I can't say across the board, it doesn't matter if you're 60 or 50 or 40, I can help you. But I can say that it's worth checking, especially for a younger person.
So if you are a young adult, and this unfortunate scenario takes place where you have extreme burns, you can contact, even if for guidance as to what to do next and what's the priority.
Yes.
Now, at the top of this conversation too, one of the things that we spoke about, and perhaps we'll have to get back to that at some point, is safety within the home. Especially for a long time, I think most people have thought about, you know, we no longer use very often kerosene stoves, etc. So the risk of using kerosene or something else, a flammable kind of thing, but you still have families who may have the butane tank not too far from the little stove. You know, that we don't promote that kind of safety and looking at it within the home. That at some point, I think that warrants perhaps a conversation.
Definitely, definitely. And the cooking habits. A lot of the cases I've seen, both those I had to send and the ones I didn't send, were things that were simple cooking habits, turning the handle of the pot away from the, you know, I've had one of my little girls was a pot of beans that was cooking, and the handle, you know, so, you know, things like candles still. And another thing you might, it would be interesting to look at the news, because I find myself in tears every time I hear of children burned up. But I bet you over the past 2 decades, the number of children burned up are equal to or greater than those I was able to help, to get help.
Yeah. No, we've had some very sad, and there are several people who don't have electricity as well, so candles, they use candles to be able to function in their homes. And yeah, the other thing I was thinking of is we don't have a habit of keeping fire extinguishers in the home, for example, which is one of the things that can be considered, that if you really want to, it doesn't mean that you'll be able to prevent everything, but it can make a difference in the very moment.
Definitely. You know, things like open sockets, the way that the Mari got burned, for instance, with the trying to move the antenna thing and so on. Yeah, safety is a huge issue, and it's a whole other topic, and perhaps it's one that can be addressed as well with the fire service at some point and some other public health sector, because a lot of these accidents happen very
And in the case with Catherine, it reinforces the precaution we need to have with some home remedies as well.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, because as we have come to find out after her accident, there are several people who have used fuel as a way of delousing. Yeah.
No wonder sometimes my sister accuses me of living in an alternate universe. I sincerely didn't know.
Yeah,
and now I hear people use Baygon. Baygon.
Yeah.
I thought 2 babies had died here from being sprayed with Baygon years ago, from being sprayed with Baygon for head lice. That's a story I heard now. I didn't hear it before. Anyways, but yes, the Burn Victim Mercy Fund is literally, it's fairly informal. It's literally based on faith. I have never, I know I'm not in charge, and I know that whenever I venture into helping a child, it's a leap of faith. And I trust, explicitly trust, that it's either going to work out or not. and it will be by the will of God. And that's honestly how I feel about it.
And people can still contribute. They can earmark their funds if they want to contribute to Catherine, or they can just go into the general fund.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I need to make it very clear. I don't owe on this air ambulance, but there is literally only $1,070 in Burn Victim Mercy Fund for the past year. I don't have any funds. People can give. They can give in different ways. If you want to contribute miles and tell me it's to help a child by name, or if you want to contribute, tell me, contact you for miles anytime I need a child, we'd appreciate that. If you want to put money in the Belize bank account for Burn Victim Mercy Fund, that would be appreciated. The account is 695-115.
Or they can just ask for the...
Or they could ask for Burn Victim Mercy Fund. It's at the Belize Bank. You're not paying anything at this time. You're supporting the effort for this child, for future children, for
or
whatever.
for any emergency situation that arises.
Yeah. So just so you know, I personally don't need to raise money now to repay, but there is always another child. I wish it wasn't true.
But it's safer to have a fund
Yes.
that you can tap into.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, so there are various ways that people can give, and we appreciate the airlines. Please, Delta, Continental, American, we do need to fly these children back and forth. The Maori has another appointment scheduled for the 15th of June, and some of the other children may still need to go back here and there. Please let us know if you can contribute the tickets to help us with the return trips.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for joining us this morning. And
Thank you for the opportunity.
focusing on this great initiative.
All right.
And we need to continue praying for the Damari. Thank you for the,
And
for
for
the
Catherine.
opportunity. And for, yes, sorry for Catherine. I meant
yeah.
Catherine.
Yeah.
We need to keep praying for Catherine. Thank you.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be talking to the Ariel Rosado Foundation. So stay tuned.